This is the Demographics Decoded podcast with me, demographer Simon Kuestenmacher.
And me, Michael Yardney, property and wealth creation expert. And this is the podcast where we unveil the trends shaping our futures. And today we're going to talk about an interesting journey that traverses the realms of demography, urban planning, and in fact, time. And it's based on a couple of articles that you wrote, Simon, in your regular column in the New Daily. One about time travel that intrigued me, and the other about bicycles as a time saver. And Simon, as I read them, it made me rethink some of the daily routines we're running, the spaces we inhabit, because you proposed some innovative ideas about how our cities could adapt to evolving, to becoming more efficient and to giving us a better quality of life, Simon.
That's always the hope. And of course, as the data guy here, I very much look at big planning studies, big research out there. And we do know all of those benefits of active travel, active transport, meaning walking, cycling. It's very good for mental health of individuals and public health, general health of the population. And we know that we should build our cities this way. And we kind of haven't done it right in Australia. From that perspective, we sprawled out. We spoke about this many times, how our cities are these sprawled monsters with population densities 4 to 5 times lower than in an equally sized European city. So for big parts of our cities, the idea that you commute to work via bicycle is only for the very fit because the trips are too long. But there is still a belt of cyclable distance, let's call it the inner 10 to 15 kilometers or so of a city, where you can commute via bicycle, at least physically, theoretically. Depends on the built environment whether this is actually possible. But this would be the ultimate dream of the urban planning classes, who of course fantasize about 15-minute cities. They fantasize about walkable communities.
Well, the 15-minute city concept really means that things are accessible with a short, well, not always riding. It could be walking, it could be bicycling, could even be riding. In other words, you're going to not be as reliant on cars, though, but you can get to schools, to offices, to parks, to hospitals, groceries. Simon, this became very evident for you and me during COVID, for people in Melbourne who were locked down more than anywhere else in the world, the importance of neighbourhood and being able to walk to these areas.
Exactly. So the goal is you step out of your house and in 15 minutes you have all the important functions of daily life accessible to you. This can be any mode of transport, by the way, but usually it is about walking and cycling. It's the idea that it is active community. You create all those public health benefits. You minimize infrastructure costs. It's quite a fantastic concept because you do know this. If you walk and cycle through your neighborhood, you see it through different eyes than if you drive through your neighborhood. It's
Definitely.
Just your eyes focus on different things and you literally consume a different city. The idea is that the cities become more livable, more accessible, and you have lower local emissions, so it's a more environmentally friendly city. You have more interactions with people because you stop each other on bicycles if you see your friends or whatever, and it's just more interactions. Of course, you are physically active, which is super healthy for you, so you have lower medical bills in the end. But from an urban planning perspective, that means mixed use, because what we have is we have islands, gigantic islands of our cities that are just residentially zoned, where there is the occasional gas station or something, but you have to drive out of this big sea of residential neighborhoods to do any kind of other thing in your life. And so you have a massive footprint in those cities. And so I quite liked the idea of 15-minute cities, of establishing this. They're wonderful European examples of cities that function well. But then it emerged in the last couple of years as a favorite target of conspiracy theorists who really criticized the 15-minute city concept as this crazy tool of the government to take control over you because they decide where you work, where you go to school, where you go to the doctor. They take away your car, which is the ultimate sign and symbol of freedom, and they hook you to a small, prison yard, essentially, that you walk in, and they say, the whole climate change stuff, that all feeds into this, which is a conspiracy, so that you just restrict movement of people, to have lemmings that are easier to manage. And it's bizarre how far this spins. There is a certain kind of anti-urban sentiment in there, this fantasy of this, rural old MacDonald had a farm type lifestyle that is much better. And I don't know where really to start with this and how to get rid of this, but it's out there. If you Google 15-minute cities, you will find plenty of those conspiracy narratives in there. But it's literally just a narrative of making sure that functions in a city are spread more evenly, that people can access them more simply, that you don't have all that much congestion in a city, and that you get to your places of interest quicker, and that you don't waste your life away in a car. Um, I
Well, the
don't.
concept actually incorporates lots of mixed-use developments like we're seeing being developed in our inner suburbs and some of the middle ring suburbs along the main roads too. It's encouraging a balance of residential, commercial, leisure spaces. Urban planners are looking for that. It's actually very hard to do in the outer suburbs though, isn't it? There
In the
isn't
outer
enough
suburbs.
density or enough infrastructure for it.
Exactly. We can't pull it off in the outer suburbs. This is something that you establish bit by bit, very consciously in Australian cities in the inner and middle suburbs. And it won't go much further out, because what we build on the outskirts of town are very low density, gigantic islands of residential neighborhoods. Saying we put all those jobs in there, that is too low. There is a certain kind of agglomeration, clustering benefit that you get by putting jobs into roughly the same area. We can spread them out more now because we don't have factories anymore, exclusively factory jobs. We made the idea that you have separate zones for living and for working. You don't want to live next to this disgusting 18th century coal plant or something. This is a coal burning factory. That is very bad for your health. So you separate the functions. Now an accountant doesn't produce many emissions, and the accountant can perfectly fine have their office next to a house. There's no risk there. So in this knowledge economy that we continue to transform ourselves into in Australia, it is perfectly acceptable to have mixed use and to actually make these 15-minute cities. In Australia it might well be a 25-minute city, to be a bit more common. But again, it will not be a massive revolution in Australia. This is something that we see with a couple of very engaged local government areas pushing for. Some will succeed, some won't. But ultimately we'll see a bit more of this, but it will not be a major groundbreaking shift in the way our cities work.
In one of the two articles that I've asked you to chat about today, and I'll leave links in the show notes, you actually talked about a bit of time travel to a degree. You were explaining how different locations have very, very different demographics.
Yeah, so this was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek narrative where I said that within a very short period of time, I first went camping in White River in Victoria, a small, wonderful campground, and then I took a plane to Noosa, a famous retirement destination in Australia. And it dawned on me that both trips were like Back to the Future, a time travel. Because on this campground, I well and truly lived in the demographic setup of Australia's 1950s or 60s, where kids were in the majority. You are not used to seeing more kids than adults. There were very few elderly people on this campground. It was just before Christmas when families went there for the big holidays. Usually families that went there had more kids than parents in their households. And so you just had these armies of kids just roaming the grounds, organizing games, having a mighty good time. And you go, yeah, this felt nice. It's just a nice idyllic feel. But you go, it also feels utterly foreign. This is something that we're not used to in my inner suburb of Northcote here in Melbourne. We're not seeing this. There's actually even in an outer suburb where young families move, your Meltons, or Wyndhams or whatever. We don't see this, and that's a new experience. It really felt like time travel. And then, would you know it? I took a plane into the future. I took a plane to Noosa, and I was pretty sure I was the youngest person on the plane at 41. And lots of elderly people. This was a plane that took much, much longer to board than a 7 a.m. business flight from Melbourne to Sydney in the morning with just the working, wage slaves, so to speak, on the plane. Bizarre feeling to know that this might probably be more of the future, except that I won't be the youngest person in this future. I will be much the norm as the elderly person that I will be in 40 years' time. And so this was just a nice example of talking about time machines, demographic time machines, to get a sense in some sort of microscopic environment, to get a view of what the macro environment might have been at a different time in the past or in the future.
Now, at the end of last year, we ran a series of podcasts about the different generational groups. And if you're watching this or listening to that and you haven't had a chance to catch those shows, finish off today and then please go back to those wherever you're listening to this, because I think it's really important to understand the different demographic groups, Simon, their wants, their needs, their aspirations, what they're worried about. If you're in business, if you're an investor, or even if you're working, just to understand what your team members want or need, or how they think differently, or how your employees or boss thinks.
Absolutely. And of course, legal disclaimer, you always deal with individuals when you deal with people one-on-one. Absolutely correct. But overall, if you are a major organization, if you are targeting broader audiences with any kind of messaging, you want to know the broader values that shape a generation, how they shift, and what the interplay is between generational values and life stage values. So every generation lives through roughly the same life stages. Sometimes millennials now do their family formation stage much later than their baby boomer parents. Millennials make families in their early to mid 30s, and their parents have done it a decade before them. But the stage itself is still relatively predictable. And so you combine the stage of the life cycle and the values of the generation with each other, and all of a sudden you see that consumer behavior shifts, that the way that you think about what kids should be doing or not doing at school shift. And it's nice and predictable to a degree. And so, always keep this in mind when you forecast things, when you try to deal with your staff. Even a simple policy like, should we force, nudge, encourage everyone back into the office 5 days a week or something like this? When you say, what will the workers think? They will react differently based on the stage of the life cycle that they find themselves in. So think through this additional lens, and I think you will be able to make a better, more complex decision in your role.
Now, Simon, in the second article that I'll link in the show notes too, where you talked about bicycles being a time saver, you also called them a form of time machine. You went into your garage and you found a time machine. What did you mean by that?
Well, so I closed the first article about the time machine, time travel to Noosa and to the campground with the idea that all I need to do now is to build an actual time machine. And would you know it?
Yes.
I actually found a time machine in my garage, which looks like a humble bicycle. And the bicycle well and truly can be used like a time machine in a city. Not always, but sometimes. There's
What do you
certain
mean by that?
of trips where the bicycle is simply the fastest way of traveling.
Yep.
Yeah? For me, this is a couple of shops or doctor's offices that are relatively close by. Getting into a car, actually getting it out of the garage in there, actually takes longer than cycling. So there it is a time machine. For some trips, or if there's a lot of traffic congestion, the bicycle is faster. So that's the obvious argument where the bicycle is the time machine. But we're also taking into account that health perspective. The Australian Institute for Health and Welfare suggests that we do at least 30 minutes of moderately vigorous activity each day. So half an hour of exercise, so to speak. And we ignore all the details. Should you do swimming? Should you do yoga? Should you go to the gym and lift weights? We just go roughly the health benefits of doing some sort of physical activity. You need to dedicate 30 minutes of your day to that. If you go to the gym or so forth, you probably need to get there, so it's more than 30 minutes, whatever it is. And so that means if you just choose to do active transport for a trip, let's say the trip takes you 30 minutes in the car, each way, your commute, you're an hour. You spend an hour of your time doing this, and then you need 30 minutes on top of this for exercise. So your commuting and exercise block took up at least 90 minutes, more likely 100 to 110 minutes if you need to go to your place of exercise. If you cycle, and the cycling takes you 45 minutes, so significantly longer than the 30-minute trip, you still end up saving time and all the while tripling your exercise budget for the day compared to the other scenario. So in this way, if you combine those two pillars, the bicycle can be one of the most time efficient and wonderful modes of transport that are out there. It's quite remarkable how energy efficient it is to travel. There's beautiful charts out there. It was always labeled as Steve Jobs' favorite chart of all times. It
Really?
measures energy used to move a person on a mode of transport by distance. And so you go, well, okay, of course I'm faster if I travel in a jet or in a race car. But if I'm travel by foot, what do I do? And so the idea of mass moved, energy burned, and distance traveled, nothing is more efficient than cycling because
Interesting.
you essentially just use your body weight and 10 kilos for the bicycle, and that's it. And it's a super efficient mode of transport for energy use and what you get out of it. So yeah, so all the Apple fanatics out there, swing on your iBike and make the most of the legacy of Steve Jobs.
Now, I want to just take a moment out from my session with Simon today to remind you that Simon Kuestenmacher is going to be the keynote speaker at Wealth Retreat on the Gold Coast on the 3rd to the 7th of May. Now, once a year we get together with a small group of already successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors. And Wealth Retreat's not a property seminar. Wealth Retreat is really, the theme of Wealth Retreat is where are you going to be in 2030, in May 2030, in 5 years' time, in all areas of your life. So it's a holistic seminar. Now, we spend a lot of time talking about property and about tax and about finance, and Simon's going to talk about the future. But I suggest that you go to wealthretreat.com.au and find out about it. But please don't count yourself out. The successes we've seen from people who've come to previous Wealth Retreats has been amazing, because you go in with a whole lot of ideas and plans for the next 5 years, but you go out with a structured plan rather than just ideas. And then I always have a one-on-one implementation session with people afterwards to make sure that they implement that plan. But we've got an amazing faculty of property, tax, business, finance, development and demographic faculty, the best faculty I could put together, and it's an intensive 5 days, but everything is included, including a lot of one-on-one time with the experts. But more than that, building a community. A lot of people that are listening to this, watching this, feel that they're a bit isolated. So the aim of Wealth Retreat is to build a community which we help keep together so that you can talk to others about your successes and failures in business, in property, in money, in entrepreneurship. wealthretreat.com.au. I invite you to join us on the Gold Coast in the beginning of May. Well, there seems to be more people riding bikes at the moment, and especially because you can get those Lime bikes or whatever the brands are there, so it's easy. You don't have to have it with you the whole time. In your article, you touched on some of the psychological impacts of commuting, and I guess what you're saying here is you can actually take advantage of your commuting time.
Exactly. So we do know that commuting is very, very bad for your mental health. There's plenty of research out there, studies that pinged you. So they literally gave you a ping and you had to quickly on a phone say what you're doing and how happy you are. And if you were driving at the moment, it said like, don't answer it, but remember when you were pinged and then answer how you felt in the moment. And we know from that commuting in a car is the time of your life where you feel most miserable, statistically speaking, on average. The reason for this is pretty clear, because you always know that your car could go 200, 250 kilometers an hour, but you are doing 20 in the shitty peak hour traffic that you find yourself in. And that is frustrating. Our brain is not meant for this. Our brain constantly goes, this could be faster. And this discrepancy of what could be and what you're experiencing, that makes you mad, sad, depressed, whatever it is. On a bicycle, your own physical fitness is the biggest determining factor of how fast you go on the trip. Yes, you might have bad luck with traffic lights one day and have luck the other day. But ultimately, it is up for your level. You are in full control. So active transport is very, very good because we people love being in full control of our life. And this is modes of transport that allow us to do this. So you put yourself into an environment where it's good for your physical health, good for your mental health. And if you take the broader systemic perspective, taking at least a couple of car trips a year away from the road and putting them onto the road as well on a bicycle is actually very, very good for the system of traffic flow as well. Because ultimately, I know that as a driver, cyclists annoy you because they're viewed as an obstacle in the course. But ultimately, you need to remember that if you pass 3 bicycles, that might take a while and a bit of maneuvering, but ultimately these 3 cars would usually be in front of you, and you would then actually miss the next traffic light. It significantly slows down traffic flow.
Hadn't thought about it that way. That's interesting. In the future, when I see a bicycle, I'll think, well, at least you're not a car.
And of course, it will annoy you because we always react in the moment. And you go, oh, this could be easier if you weren't there. But you then think that this person wouldn't be there. But usually this person would be in a car instead.
Yes, sure. Now, interestingly, working from home for the last 5 years or so, I miss the commute to work. I mean, the commute to my last office, in the office where Metropole is in Brighton, is only 2-3 minutes in the car. But I used to, in the old days, enjoy it. It used to be tapes, and then it was CDs, and now it's podcasts. So I took advantage of the time to learn, to entertain, to enjoy. So I actually look forward to the occasional long trip that I have, Simon. So I guess if you are stuck in the outer suburbs, take advantage of the travel time rather than see it as a bad thing.
Absolutely. And the most important advice that we can, of course, give you if you're commuting in a car is always download Demographics Decoded.
Definitely.
To soften the pain of your commute. People do this. There is a reason why podcasts went absolutely through the roof. I think most podcasts in the 30 to 40 minute segment, they are roughly a commute long for many people. So it's the convenient matchup.
That's exactly why we keep our show to around this time. Having said that, one of my favourite podcasts is generally over 2 hours, and that's really quite difficult. But I learned to listen at 1.5 times speed anyway. Well, there's a website that if you're interested in understanding how walkable, how commutable your location is, or a particular location is, it's called walkscore.com, and it actually scores suburbs all around the world to see how walkable they are. From, if you get a score of 90 to 100, it's a walker's paradise. You can do your daily errands without a car. You can find suburbs that are very walkable, somewhat walkable, and other suburbs that are car dependent. So I've actually found that very interesting, and you can even look up particular properties and addresses to see what's going on. Walkscore.com. Look forward to catching up with you again next week. This Demographics Decoded podcast has been brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Just go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property advisory, wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team at Metropole will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades, and we've been helping clients with for well over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. In between these Demographics Decoded shows, you can follow me on social media, and I suggest you also follow Simon Kuestenmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all social media platforms. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody who may also benefit, please tell them about Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us in our quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to be shaping their future. And of course, if you don't currently subscribe, we'd love you to. And of course, any of the information that we've been sharing with you is general information because we don't know your specific circumstances.